There is a part of your mind you were never taught to use, not because it's weak, but because it's dangerous to the world they built around you. It sees without eyes, it hears what's never spoken, and when it opens, the illusion breaks. They called it the third eye, but Thoth called it the gate, a gate that doesn't open with effort, but with remembrance. If you're here, this remembrance is stirring, and it's no accident. You didn't find this video, you crossed into it, because a part of you remembers, not how to think, but how to see. This isn't about activating a chakra, it's not about visualizing light, it's about reclaiming a lost code, a vibrational language etched into your being before birth, a signal buried beneath centuries of conditioning, noise, and forgetting. What you're about to receive was hidden, not just from your mind, but from your access to inner truth. Because once you see with the forbidden eye, the game of the world loses its power. This video isn't here to teach, it's here to open, to help you remember what cannot be said, only felt. Thoth's forbidden code isn't a technique, it's an awakening. And today, it begins again, not in the mind, but in the deep eye behind the eye, where knowing doesn't think, it burns. So if you feel this fire rising within, subscribe to keep the current alive, because what follows was never meant to be forgotten. You were not born blind. You were taught to close your eyes and call it reality. We entered this world with a vision beyond form, a sacred sight that perceives not the surface, but the pulse behind the form. Yet from the first breath, the veils began. Names were placed upon things, and mystery was replaced by meaning. Wonder became explanation, and the inner compass was buried beneath the noise of facts, logic, and fear. They called it education, but what if it was forgetting? In the temples of ancient Kemet, the first lesson was not spoken, it was remembered, because to remember is to remember, to piece back together the fragments of the self that were scattered. What if this blindness, dear, was designed, not by evil, but by inertia, a world that forgot its own eyes could see, and so it taught its children to be blind, to dismiss the flicker of intuition, to ignore the whispers behind silence, to laugh at the invisible as irrational, but you felt it, that quiet ache inside the bones, the sense that you are more than this identity, that something ancient inside you is watching, waiting, and weeping. This is the threshold where forgetting begins to crack, where the ordinary no longer satisfies because it was never real. And here, something dangerous begins. The moment you question your sight, the true eye begins to open. They say the third eye is a chakra, but the ancients knew better. It was never merely energy, it was intelligence, a sacred organ of vision and vibration, a receiver of divine architecture, and it has been sleeping, not dead, just silenced, by food, by noise, by fear, by screens and systems and survival, by the subtle whispers that said, "Don't trust what you feel, trust what they told you." But beneath that programming, the eye still breathes, and sometimes, in dreams, in déjà vu, in moments of stillness, it flickers. That flicker is not imagination, it's remembrance. Thoth knew this. He did not teach students. He initiated them. He didn't give knowledge. He gave keys. And the first key was always this: you are already whole, but your vision was fractured, and if you want to see, you must first unsee. You must become willing to let the lie collapse, to feel the silence of your own soul, to face the terror of the unknown, not out there, but within. Because this isn't about learning. This is about shedding. This is the ancient rite of unlearning the blindness. And as you step beyond this threshold, there is no going back. The eye begins to open, not when you try, but when you surrender the illusion that you were ever blind. The true eye is not located in your forehead. It lives in the silence between thoughts, in the space where you begin to feel instead of explain. Let us now enter that space and listen to what the forbidden code is ready to reveal. What sees when your eyes are closed? The third eye is not an organ, it is an interface, a portal between dimensions of knowing. And Thoth did not call it a chakra. He called it the seat of vision, not of sight, but vision. For what we call seeing is merely perceiving light. But vision is perceiving truth beyond appearances. The eye behind the eyes is not physical, it is a pulse, a flame within the pineal, but also a resonance within the heart. Yes, the third eye and the heart were never separate in the ancient maps, because true vision emerges not from logic, but from alignment. When the eye in your skull and the eye in your chest begin to beat as one, the architecture of reality becomes visible. You begin to see with coherence, and coherence is the language of creation. In the Temple of Dendera, this was taught not in words, but in light. Rooms were carved to echo sacred frequencies, walls embedded with symbols, not as decoration, but activation. The spiral, the eye, the serpent, the star, each one aligned to open a gate, not outside, but in the geometry of your own body, because the body is a temple, and the pineal gland seated deep between the hemispheres was the altar, an altar of perception, where the inner and outer worlds fuse. They knew what modern science now begins to whisper, that the pineal is photoreceptive. It senses light even in the dark. It produces DMT, the molecule of vision beyond matter, and it pulses, not randomly, but in rhythm with celestial cycles. The ancients aligned their lives with stars not for beauty, but because they knew. When your body is in harmony with the cosmos, your vision becomes galactic. The forbidden code of Thoth was never a sentence. It was a sequence, a frequency, a way of vibrating that tunes your inner eye to the divine blueprint. And the first command of that code was, still the noise. You cannot see truth through static. You cannot hear the song of your soul through the hum of survival. Silence is sacred. It is the first gate. The eye behind the eye only opens when silence becomes your home. So listen now, not with your ears, but with the soft space behind your forehead, with the warmth in your chest, with the knowing that doesn't need words. This is not imagination. This is memory returning. The eye is not something you open. It is something that opens you. And when it does, you do not just see more, you become more, because to see truly is to become the one who is no longer veiled. If the eye is a flame, then what dimmed it? Let us now descend into the chambers of forgetfulness, where fear, programming, and trauma hardened the temple within. What if your third eye didn't close, but was silenced? Not by fluoride, not by diet alone, but by something far more pervasive. Noise, not the external kind, but the noise of survival, the constant hum of fear, of proving, of performing, the invisible static that numbs the heart and dulls the vision of the soul. You were born seeing, not with your eyes, but with your field. Your body was tuned to energy. Your heart read intentions. Your pineal translated light into knowing. But then, the world taught you to doubt, to measure, to obey. You were taught that only what can be proven is real. That intuition is just a feeling. That imagination is just a game. That knowing must come with credentials. And so the veil thickened, not over your eye, but over your being. You began to forget, not facts, but frequencies. You stopped listening to the tingling in your skin when something was off. You ignored the dreams that came too vivid. You silenced the voice that whispered, "This is not your path." And so the third eye didn't shut. It became calcified by disbelief, because disbelief is the most effective blindfold, not imposed from outside, but chosen. And yet silence, real silence, can reverse the calcification, but not silence as absence, silence as presence. The kind of silence that listens to what vibrates beneath the noise, the silence that holds your tears without needing a reason, the silence that reminds you, you are not broken, you are buried, and the eye will open again when you stop trying to see. Because true vision arises not when you try, but when you release. And this is the great paradox. You cannot force the eye to open. You must become soft enough for it to bloom. The ancients knew. The calcification is emotional, spiritual, symbolic. Every judgment you've believed, every shame you've carried, every trauma you've tucked into your nervous system is a crust, a shell over the temple. But healing is not cleansing. It is remembrance. When you remember your innocence, the eye begins to pulse. When you forgive the voice that silenced you, the veil begins to thin. And then, the image returns, not as vision, but as vibration, not as form, but as frequency. This is the healing of the eye, not to see what's out there, but to become still enough to remember what's in here. If your body is the temple, what sacred architecture lies hidden within? Let us now decode the inner map, the geometry of awakening inscribed in your bones. Can a temple be built without hands? What if the most sacred architecture was never meant to rise from stone, but from memory? Every ancient temple encoded proportions of the cosmos, the golden ratio, the sacred spiral, the cubic resonance of creation. But these were not monuments to the gods. They were blueprints of the initiate. Thoth didn't write the tablets to be read with the eyes. He composed them as harmonic structures, frequencies designed to be felt through alignment. Each symbol, a frequency, each glyph, a fractal of consciousness, and the eye, your eye, was meant to decode it not by thought, but by resonance. Because when the third eye opens, it doesn't just see light, it sees structure. It maps silence into form. It reconfigures the sacred geometry of perception. You are not looking out into the world. You are building the world with your gaze. Each thought, a line, each feeling, a curve, each belief, a doorway or a wall. The Egyptians didn't just draw the eye of Horus for mystique, they mapped it inside the brain, layer by layer, tracing how sight merges with intuition, how emotion filters insight, how the pineal encodes light into vision beyond time. They knew that true vision is not reactive, it's generative. Your inner temple isn't just a place of refuge, it's a field of frequency that shapes everything you touch. And when that geometry aligns, reality stops resisting, because it was never meant to be controlled, only cohered. That's the forgotten art, coherence. The third eye doesn't open to see what's already there. It opens to bring what's possible into form, not from chaos, but from sacred design. What if your body was a cathedral built from starlight? The ancients never separated the divine from the physical. They walked in temples to awaken the one they carried within. Thoth whispered of a chamber, hidden beneath bone and breath, where no priest could enter unless summoned by coherence. A place not of space, but of harmony. The temple was never a building, it was a frequency, and just like the pyramids align with Orion, your inner chambers resonate with constellations of memory, geometry of emotion, and architecture of will. Each breath becomes a chisel, each intention a column, each silence a dome. So what is your temple made of? Is it still echoing the blueprints of pain and inherited patterns? Or have you begun the sacred reconstruction? Because here's the code. You cannot open the third eye while living in the architecture of fear. You must redesign your inner cathedral from the ground of truth. Remove the bricks placed by shame. Dismantle the walls mortared by judgment. Open the skylight your ancestors sealed with silence. The eye sees clearest when the walls are transparent. Sacred geometry is not an external science. It's the inner song that arises when all your parts begin to sing the same note. And when that note is heard, you don't just see. You become the vision. The golden ratio lives in your breath. The spiral of Fibonacci unfolds in your spine. The tetrahedron hums in your intentions. You are the mandala. You are the pattern and the pulse. And the third eye? It is the architect's compass, not just to decode the world, but to draw new lines across the fabric of your being. This is how you reconfigure reality, not by breaking the system, but by rebuilding the temple. Let your inner altar align, because geometry is destiny. You were never just seeing, you were remembering what sight once was. There is a moment, barely perceptible, when the veil thins. You don't tear through it, you exhale, and it opens. The third eye is not a thing, it is an opening. Not of vision, but of vibration. And when that vibration aligns, the boundary between worlds begins to shimmer. Thoth called it the thin gate, a membrane woven from emotion, belief, and silence. It's not out there, it's the part of you still untouched by story. Every culture knew this, the shamans, the prophets, the scribes. They entered trance not to escape reality, but to remember a layer forgotten. The Sufis spun, the Egyptians breathed geometrically, the Taoists listened. They didn't open the portal, they became it. What lives on the other side? Not aliens, not angels, not fantasy, but memory. A living field of resonance that still holds your original code before trauma wrote over it. When the third eye activates, you don't see the future. You begin to read the scripts written long before time began, not with the mind, but with the marrow. It's a remembering. The portal shows you that time is not linear, that cause precedes choice, that intuition is memory knocking from the other side of the mirror. And when you pass through it, you lose nothing. You dissolve the false. You forget what was borrowed. You shed what was projected. And what remains is light. A light that doesn't shine, it vibrates. A knowing that doesn't inform, it transforms. And then everything begins to echo. The patterns, the faces, the places you thought were random, all orchestrated by a part of you that never forgot. You are not crossing into another world. You are collapsing the illusion of separation, because this was always here. The birds were speaking, the numbers were singing, the dreams were guiding, but only now. Do you hear? And as the resonance deepens, the question no longer is, what will I become? But, what has always been waiting for me to return? You don't unsee once you've crossed. But vision isn't enough. Now comes the decoding. When symbols begin to echo and the eye starts to whisper back, the portal is not activated by effort, but by alignment. When the breath slows and the internal noise dims, you begin to feel the space between sounds. That's where the veil pulses. It is not dramatic, it is precise, it is a silent choreography of surrender. And when it opens, not everything enters, only what matches your resonance. This is why Thoth spoke in symbols, not to confuse, but to protect. Because only a frequency matching the teaching can unlock its true meaning. The third eye decodes not just visions, but vibrations. It reads people as energy, places as memory, words as frequency, and you as a mirror. In this mirror, shadows emerge not to haunt, but to be reintegrated. You begin to understand that every external conflict was a glyph, a message written by your own unconscious. You are not seeing truth, you are seeing yourself, reflected in truth's geometry. And when that portal expands, the world becomes language. Bird calls become omens, encounters become synchronicities, coincidences become confirmations. You are not paranoid, you are tuned, because everything is speaking. The hidden code of Thoth was not a secret, it was a vibration awaiting coherence, a frequency of memory, coded into the eye of inner knowing. And when the eye is open, what you once feared to see, you now bow to. You do not control the portal, you surrender to its rhythm. Because this isn't about opening the eye, it's about becoming the space through which the cosmos sees itself again. And that is the real initiation. What if the visions you seek are already whispering within you? They called it the eye of the gods, not for what it sees, but for what it remembers. A chamber of echoes, not images, but knowing. A frequency, etched in silence, not sight. To open the eye is not to look, but to collapse the illusion of separation. The seer and the seen dissolve in one wave, and what remains is the truth before thought. Thoth's forbidden code was never a map. It was a mirror, a fragment of the all, encoded inside the watcher's own gaze. This is not about mystical visions or divine light shows. It is about perception, raw, naked beyond the veil of narrative. To see as the gods did is to see without self. The eye opens not with force but with surrender. Its lid is weighted by generations of fear, of what we might find when no longer blind, not to the world but to our own origin. Many tried to force it open with potions, rituals, chants, but the ones who truly saw and did so by becoming empty. The true eye never needed to be opened, only remembered, only listened to in the silence between one heartbeat and the next. And in that silence comes the echo, a pulse that does not arise from within but from beyond time itself. These echoes are not words, they are symbols. They are pulses of recognition that vibrate against the bones of the soul. When your frequency aligns, the eye reflects more than vision. It reveals your shape in the field, your signature in the divine matrix. This is why ancient temples were aligned with celestial codes, to mirror the third eye's geometry, a portal not through space but perception. The eye sees energy, and energy never lies. It is not fooled by masks, titles, or mantras. It pierces straight into coherence or chaos. Many fear this vision because it strips illusions bare. It shows the misalignment between who we are and who we act as. But this is the gift. The correction begins with clarity. When the eye sees clearly, the soul recalibrates. In Egyptian lore, the Eye of Horus was divided into 6 parts, each one a sense, each one a portal to complete perception. Sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, thought. But what they never told you is that thought was the final veil, the gateway beyond which the eye truly awakens. You are not the observer. You are the field observing itself through the lens of the one eye, and in that gaze, the code sings. When Thoth whispered to the scribes, he did not dictate knowledge. He mirrored them into seeing, into decoding the eye's echo in themselves. That echo is alive in you, dormant perhaps, muffled by noise, by false seeking, but alive, waiting. Listen to your visions, not the ones you imagine, but the ones that arrive uninvited. They are echoes too, sacred ones. Feel that pressure in the middle of your forehead. That's not tension. That is the eye preparing to remember, to realign your temple with the frequency of the source. You don't need to open the eye. You need to stop closing it. with doubt, with fear, with noise. Its nature is openness. Let it be. The veil is thinning now. You've been sensing it. The eye awakens not in silence, but as silence, and when it does, you no longer ask, what is real? You remember, you become. Next, we cross the final threshold, the moment of direct transmission. Let us step into the temple of resonance. And so the eye opens not once, but in ripples, like echoes through a chamber of stars. The first opening reveals sensation, the second, memory, the third, a forgotten oath. An oath made before incarnation, one not spoken, but felt in the marrow of silence. It was not, I will awaken, but I never truly slept. As your perception shifts, familiar places change shape. A street becomes a map. A tree whispers names. A stranger glances, and you remember, not them, but the pattern, the sacred repetition that lives behind the veil of randomness. Because nothing is random, not even your forgetfulness. Thoth's code is not a spell, but a spiral. Each turn reveals not something new, but something more precise. And precision is the blade that pierces illusion. What was blurred becomes clear, not because it changed, but because you did. When the eye aligns, the body begins to speak in symbols. A shiver at the base of the spine, a flutter behind the forehead, goosebumps when no cold wind blows. These are not coincidences. They are echoes returning home. And the home is not a place, it's a state of clarity, of coherence, of communion. You don't see the truth, you become the resonance through which it is revealed. And that resonance can't be forced, only remembered. The more you chase visions, the more they hide. But the moment you turn inward with reverence, they arrive. Not as hallucinations, but as recognitions. As if the fabric of space softly nods in your direction, saying, yes, you are aligned. Do not seek to open the third eye like a door pried by will. Approach it like a flame you protect with your breath. Gentle, intentional, listening more than pushing. Because the most sacred temples never open to violence. They unfold in grace. This is why so many miss the threshold. Because they're looking for power, not presence. But the third eye was never about domination. It was always about devotion to truth, to silence, to what lives beyond form. And now with every breath, you're no longer looking outward. You're becoming the mirror itself. Not a seeker, but the signal. And that signal doesn't speak in words. It hums in frequencies only the heart can translate. One final echo arrives, not loud, but infinite. It asks nothing. It answers nothing. It simply is. And in its presence, you remember. You are the key. There is a fire behind the eye, older than the sun, quieter than breath. It speaks not with sound, but with light formed into thought. The moment the third eye opens fully, a flame is born. Not one that burns, but one that reveals. It is the inner flame Thoth whispered about, hidden within the eye not of flesh, but of essence. The Egyptians did not speak of vision as mere seeing, they spoke of it as knowing, a sacred act of merging perception with vibration. This is the moment where the journey turns inward once again, not to search, but to declare. The eye has opened, the inner geometry has aligned. Now the flame must speak, and what it speaks becomes the word that creates worlds. What is this flame? And why did Thoth guard it with symbols instead of sentences? Because the flame is the source of the living word, the logos. Not a spoken command, but a vibrational imprint encoded with will and clarity. When the flame rises within the third eye, language returns to its original function, not communication, but creation. This is why Thoth never authored books in the traditional sense. He etched codes into the ethers, knowing that only those who activated the eye, felt the flame, and embodied the silence could translate them. We live in a world of words that mean nothing, but the eye, when lit by the sacred flame, burns through illusion. It sees the falseness behind empty speech. It reveals the forgotten potency of the spoken frequency. Every time you speak from this inner fire, you alter the code of your reality, not metaphorically, but architecturally. The temples of Egypt were not built only with stone. They were constructed with vibrational word, sung into being by priest initiates who had aligned their inner fire with the word. In these temples, before a stone was laid, a tone was emitted. Before a hall was built, a chant was sustained. The flame in the eye guided the geometry of sound, and the sound carved the architecture of energy. This is the mystery of the word made flesh, not a religious dogma, but a vibrational principle. What you speak from your flame becomes incarnate in matter. That is why those who speak unconsciously recreate chaos, but those who burn cleanly within speak only when the fire agrees. This is not repression. It is sacred alignment. When the I and flame fuse into coherence, your words become sovereign. They are no longer attempts to persuade or defend. They are declarations of frequency, spells in the original sense, not manipulation, but anchoring. Thoth's initiates were trained to remain silent for years, not because they lacked knowledge, but because their word was too powerful to be used lightly. The training was not to speak, but to burn. Can you imagine your voice as fire? A soft, unhurried flame that illuminates rather than scorches. A language that bends reality because it vibrates in truth. Not truth as opinion, but truth as frequency alignment with divine architecture. When the I burns, the voice is reformed. You begin to notice that what you say begins to happen more quickly. That silence feels more potent than noise. That words carry weight, not emotionally, but architecturally. You stop manifesting randomly. You start choosing frequency with intention. The I, the flame, the word. This is the triad of creation in Thoth's hidden teachings. And this is why, for centuries, his codes were feared. Not because they were dangerous, but because they returned power to the initiate. Power not over others, but over form. The old world taught us to use words. The ancient world taught us to become the word, to align the inner fire with silence, to listen before speaking, to burn before declaring, to become coherent before creating. This coherence is not stillness, it is movement in alignment. Like flame that dances but never loses center. The third eye, when a flame doesn't seek to convince, it simply sees and speaks from what it sees in truth. And this is where the alchemy deepens. The moment the I and the flame are in unity, the voice that emerges is not just yours. It is ancestral. It is universal. It is the same vibration that once formed pyramids, split seas, summoned stars. That's the paradox Thoth embedded in his silence. Your voice is most powerful the moment you realize it's not just yours. Your I dissolves into we. Your thought becomes field. Your flame becomes pattern. And your word becomes law. Every word you speak is the spark of your inner flame. Every silence, the space of its glow. When the inner fire burns, the I becomes a lens. The word becomes a flame. Those who have walked the path remember, the most potent spells were never written. They were spoken, ignited in the temple of being, and carried outward in resonance. Thoth's forbidden code begins with two truths. 1. Flame without vision is chaos. 2. Vision without flame is stagnation. To unite the two is to speak worlds into existence. But the process is subtle. The flame kindles, the I attunes, and the word emerges when both are in harmony. This harmony is not quiet, but not noisy either. It's the pulse behind the universe, a hum that travels from the silent altar within your pineal. Imagine a word that isn't uttered, but echoed through all creation, a vibration that resonates long after sound has faded, and that echoes back into you, amplified by your own sincerity. This is why initiates were taught to speak in glances, not sentences, to cast sparks with silent weight. Because once the alignment is made, even a whisper shapes destiny. When you speak the word from the I flame, time dances, walls vibrate, patterns align, doors open not out of coincidence, but because the word has anchored in the fabric of the unseen. But beware, the flame is not a toy. The word is not a slogan. They are alive, and quick to mirror the sincerity or fear in your heart. A flippant flame is a forest fire, a careless word is a poem of destruction. Power emerges not from how much you can speak, but from how consciously you hold the flame. This is responsibility, not belief, not doctrine, but alignment. And here's where the sacred geometry re-enters. Your word must resonate with the Yahweh design of creation, not just your intent. In ancient Egyptian ritual, each word had a frequency, a tonal geometry coded into the glyphs of the hieroglyphs themselves. When spoken within the I flame, those glyphs didn't just relay meaning, they activated form. So when you invoke your own word, let it be born from the stillness of your inner temple, shaped by the flame that lives in the I, encoded with your authentic vibration, and sent outward to serve creation, not your ego. This is the final integration. This is the mission of the initiate: to see clearly, I; to burn purely, flame; to speak deliberately, word. This is the triad of creation: temple within, flame alight, word sounding in coherence. And when you fully embody it, something shifts. You are no longer a wanderer in the world. You become the axis on which worlds turn. Every breath becomes a prayer. Every word a prayer translated into frequency, every silence, a canvas for the unseen. Now that the eye sees, the flame burns, and the word carries, what form will you call into being? To see is to awaken, to burn is to remember, to speak is to shape. At this final edge of the inner temple, you are not asked to believe, but to embody, to carry what cannot be taught, and transmit what cannot be said. The eye now watches from within. It no longer seeks, it reveals. It sees beyond what the mind permits, and it dissolves illusions not with violence, but with presence. The flame now knows your name. It burns where you once feared. In your grief, it glows. In your anger, it softens. In your silence, it waits. It is not a fire of consumption, but of remembrance. And the word you now carry is not a repetition. It is an origin. It is not a spell, but a return, a realignment to a geometry that was always within you, but had fallen silent, beneath the noise of forgetting. This is why Thoth hid this teaching, not out of secrecy, but protection. Because once you awaken this triad, the eye, the flame, the word, you are no longer passive in creation. You become a participant in frequency alignment, a sculptor of timelines, a keeper of resonance, and what you emit becomes what you receive. Let this truth imprint itself in your breath. You are not here to learn how to create. You are here to remember you already are. Now ask yourself not what to manifest, but what vibration are you willing to become? What alignment are you ready to maintain? Not when it is easy, but when silence tests your devotion. If this burns in you, if this recognition stirs something ancient, then carry it. Let your gaze change. Let your voice change. Let your stillness speak in spirals of gold. And when you walk in the world, don't explain. Don't convince. Just emit. Your frequency is your signature. Your word is your code. The flame knows your pulse. The eye sees the path, and the code has already begun. When the eye opens and the word ignites, what begins to return is not new. It is ancient. It is divine. And it remembers you. You did not inherit their power. You are its continuation. Before names, before temples, before symbols etched into stone, there was frequency, and frequency did not speak. It resonated. It moved through the unseen, rising like breath before sound, shaping form without touch. This is the language of the forgotten gods, not beings with faces and altars, but consciousnesses encoded in vibration. Each god was a field, a bandwidth of pure coherence living not above, but within. Thoth was not just a figure, he was a frequency of remembrance. Horus, a frequency of awakened vision. Isis, a field of divine integration. They do not return in physical form, they return in you. When your field aligns, when the architecture of your energy matches the resonance of their memory, you become a transmitter of their essence. The temples were not built to worship them, they were harmonic chambers to become them. Each wall, each glyph, each chamber, calibrated to shift your vibration and retune the geometry of your being. And now, you hold the same possibility, not through rituals alone, but through coherence, through tuning your field until the forgotten gods recognize themselves in you. Because to invoke a god is not to call upon something greater, but to remember you were never separate. Let this truth echo through your being. Divinity is not summoned, it is remembered, and remembrance is not of facts or names, it is of frequencies. This is why the pineal eye was veiled, not to punish, but to preserve, because what it reveals is not for the uninitiated mind, but for the aligned field. When you open the eye, when you ignite the flame, and when you speak the word, you emit the frequency of gods, and the universe does not resist it. It rearranges around it. So walk not as one who seeks, but as one who emits. Speak not to convince, but to attune. Create not from desire, but from divine frequency. You are not invoking Thoth, you are becoming his field. And this frequency was never lost. It only waited for coherence. The gods are not returning through temples, they are returning through frequencies, and yours has just begun to resonate. What if your words are the true architects of reality? Because they are not yours alone, but the echoes of the eye that sees. The eye opens, not to see the world as it is, but to realign the world to what it once was. Before distortion, before language was stolen, before intention was fragmented, before the sacred syllables were replaced by noise. Now, with the third eye awakened, not as concept, but as pulse, there is a return. A homecoming of tone, of rhythm, of harmonic identity. The frequency has been remembered, but memory alone is not enough. Now it must be commanded, spoken, transmitted through every cell, because you are no longer the receiver, you are the broadcaster. The teachings of Thoth always end where the word begins. Not any word, the word behind all others. The soundless resonance that carries no grammar, but entire worlds. It does not translate, it initiates. So breathe, and speak only when the body is fully listening, because now every word will imprint, every phrase is a seal, and every tone is a code, reshaping the architecture of your field. Repeat this within. I realign with the sound before sound. I become the transmitter of the one frequency. My words are temples, my breath, the flame. These are not affirmations, they are reactivations, echo keys. Each time you say them, you are not calling something new. You are remembering what was placed in you before birth. The calcification we spoke of is not of bone or gland, but of unspoken truths, of emotions repressed, of ancestral echoes trapped in muscles and breath. Now, in this silence, they release. Let your voice tremble. Let your chest burn. Let your tears fall not from sadness, but from frequency dislodging distortion. Because this is the temple, not built of stone, but of syllables. Every vowel is a vibration. Every consonant a carving on the inner chamber of your body. When you say I see, you are invoking the I. When you say I choose, when you are igniting the flame. When you say I am, you are activating the word. And when all three align, you are no longer manifesting from desire. You are manifesting from identity. This is the true manifestation, not from the mind's image, but from the being's frequency. This is the language of Thoth, and now it is yours. Repeat once more. I am the I am the flame, I am the word. Pause. Let that resonate in your spine, in the space between your breaths, in the memory that is not in your brain, but your field. This portal is not closing, it is expanding, and every word you speak after this video will either echo your awakening or echo your past. So speak as a temple, walk as a glyph, breathe as a sacred act, because the code has remembered itself through you. If this reactivated your inner voice, and listen to it, and let others hear it too. The next code is waiting in the description and pinned comment, and just as the word ignites the flame, the seal begins to break. What is released next was never meant to be hidden. What if the true I was never yours? Alone but a mirror returning the gaze of the source? There is always a final key, and it is never found in the scrolls, nor spoken by the voice of others. It arrives in silence, when the echoes have settled, and the flame burns without fuel. You are no longer seeking. You are no longer decoding. You are no longer waiting for the next symbol to explain your existence, because the eye sees what no knowledge can teach. What has been activated here is not just vision, but presence. Not just awareness, but architecture. The architecture of a being who no longer lives by default. The code of Thoth is not ancient because of its age. It is ancient because it predates time itself. It lives in the spiral, not the line. And now, that spiral breathes in you. So ask yourself, what will you become when you no longer identify with the mind but with the frequency? When you no longer seek to manifest from lack, but transmit from wholeness? What happens when the code is not something you apply, but something you are? This was not just a video, it was a transmission. An echo sent not to be remembered, but to be reawakened in the ones whose field carried the same glyph. If you reach this point, it means the final seal inside you is already softening. The veil you thought protected you, I was the same one that delayed your reactivation. But now the seal opens, not with effort, not with force, but with resonance. And as it opens, so does your life, to new perceptions, new timelines, new inner geometries. This is your field now, sacred, sovereign, uncoded by anything except your own vibration. And the question that remains is no longer how do I awaken, but what reality am I now coded to transmit? You are the I, you are the flame, you are the word, and the world is listening. This portal may close now, but the next frequency is already waiting. If you felt the resonance, the next reprogramming is in the comment below. Subscribe to stay in alignment, because this is not the end. This is where your true transmission begins.